Hey, this is Issa Nakazwa with Voices of the Community, and we're here at Arts for a Better Bay Area Summit 2023. Thank you so much for talking to us. You did wonderful on the stage tonight. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are for the folks who don't know and what brings you here today?
Absolutely. I'm Maria Jenson, and I'm the director of SOMArts Cultural Center. And I've been a part of Arts for a Better Bay Area for about, I would say, 7 years. So that's why I'm here.
And what got you into ABBA from the beginning? Can you give us a little bit of the backstory?
Yeah, interestingly enough, before working at SOMArts, I was at SF which is the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And I thought that it was interesting to have such a big institution in the city, but not as much of a direct connection with like local artists and other arts organizations. So I wanted to kind of find a way of being directly in support of the artist. And being part of Arts for a Better Bay Area gave me the opportunity to be more in direct communication with the artists. But also what's really fascinating is I started doing policy work. So now we started engaging in influencing some of the laws and things that are around arts funding and also around spaces for artists. So we are, advocates for the artists. We're also, very concerned that we want to make sure there's sustainability for the arts for the long term.
Yeah, I want to thank you because I really feel like as an artist who's living in the Bay Area and has for so many years, like over 20 years, it felt like the passion and the fire that I feel like has been missing from the conversation you've channeled for all of us. So I just want to thank you because I feel like, to your point that you were making, that I want you to somewhat summarize about the power of narrative in the opposite direction, where we are starting to internalize the doom loop in narrative as people living in San Francisco and perpetuating it. So if you can kind of summarize that point around what is something to be wary of around internalizing this narrative that the media has created, and what is another narrative that we can kind of internalize or project out to combat that, or to at least talk back to it.
Yeah, that's a very, very deep question. And I think it has to also do with how we are valuing artists and how we're valuing arts community and some of the smaller arts organizations. And so what I was trying to say here is that instead of us looking to tech or looking to some other corporate structure to find support and partnership, we need to recognize that we're the reason why these tech organizations and businesses want to come to San Francisco. So we are already here. We're the stakeholders of the community. And if anything, the partnerships need to go kind of in a different direction, where businesses and corporations are asking how they can participate with what's happening in arts and culture here. So how do we find our voice? How do we change that narrative? And changing the narrative means we just need to go back and revisit San Francisco's history, its actual history of art, and including so many artists that have emanated from here who have gone on to worldwide recognition. They are all grassroots artists that started here. And so San Francisco has this great ability to actually create a whole generation after generation of incredible artists. And these artists are what is changing the world, because art leads to open minds. And if we want to further the ideals of democracy, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that the artists who are literally helping us to interpret our lives and helping us to see other lives and helping us to understand, these are the people that we need to be funding first and foremost. And we need to now get our business community to understand, for capital, the biggest producer of what's been happening locally, surprisingly, the arts are a big production of revenue.
And are you seeing, I know you had mentioned at the beginning, you've been going to the opera and the symphony and local events, are you seeing and witnessing artists actually shift their understanding of their own value since the pandemic? Do you think the pandemic created that perspective for artists to really say, hey, I understand my worth and value, and I'm going to show up to, the proverbial table with a different kind of sense of worth without being defensive, but standing in our power? Do you actually see that translating, or do you think it's going to take time?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, especially when you talk about the pandemic, because what we're talking about then is when we were all in isolation.
Yes.
And that isolation actually was something very beneficial in some ways, because everyone got a chance to really think about what their lives mean, where the meaning is in their life, what the value is of their life. And so coming out of the pandemic, I think it's been very hard for artists because now they're kind of running into this narrative around the doom loop. And artists are, very fragile, people in our community because they're literally reading the cultural tea leaves for us. And so sometimes they're the first ones to actually see how things aren't going in the right direction. And so this is why I double down on the point that for any discussion of recovery or reimagining the city, it has to be done with the artists sitting centered at the table. And this idea around the doom loop is like, it's time for us to counter that with the joy loop. And so that's what I have been trying to foster, even in my own way, like just promoting what's happening in a city and attaching the word joy loop to it, because that is actually what's happening here.
That's beautiful. And what do you, in your own kind of perspective, like what do you think the responsibility of artists and cultural workers is to our neighbors who don't self-identify as artists, who are on the streets? And that isn't like a mirage, right? Like folks are really going through it and have been. It's not new. It's just being exacerbated by these conditions. Like, what do you think our responsibility, if you think we have one, is to the folks on the streets who are just like, they have to stay. They don't have mobility, and they're also part of our ecosystem.
That's also a very tough question, because even trying to get to the theater this evening, I'm coming to an event, talking about art and culture, and I had to step over people who were in various states of, drug addiction and drug affliction, and across the street is police activity. Certainly it's something we can't turn our backs on, but one of the things I try to get everyone to understand that within these discussions around the homeless or, lack of affordability or health issues or healthcare, access to healthcare, artists are impacted by all of that as well. Some artists actually are living on the street. Yes. Some artists are unhoused. Some artists don't have access to healthcare. So if we can move the conversation to being about the overall health of a population, I think that we would go a long way towards solving some of these issues, and then we would reduce that struggle that the city has and that individuals have. Like, who do we take care of? Is it the person who's already employed, or is it the person who's unhoused? Which human do we put our focus on? And obviously, for each human, there are different needs. So we need to look at the collective, global, universal need of our humanity and approach it from that perspective, and then not segment it into categories of what type of homeless person are you, because that's how funding also happens as well, right? So foundations, like, it's almost like, in what state of dire state are you in? Yeah. And so we need to change the narrative around and our idea and understanding of who's fragile. Right. Because we use the word fragile a lot, and I think that because of the pandemic and because of the economic crisis we're in, we're finding more and more people being on that list who normally don't look like the kind of people who would be on that list. And so how do we then, identify who needs more? If you see a group of homeless people and their different ethnicities, how do you decide which person you're caring for? So we need to kind of think about ways of thinking about our collective humanity in this moment. And from that place of collective humanity, then we can do all kinds of amazing things. And this is why we sometimes look to the socialist democratic countries like, Germany or, any of the European countries and other countries where a person is taken care of by the country, right? And we don't have that thinking here. And so I hate to say this, but literally that capitalist mindset is also part of the mechanism that has created this. So as we're trying to bolster our local economies, within that mix are, the issues that, more capital means more expense and more this, more. So there's some very deep conversations, but they really need to start with let's start with humanity. Let's find our humanity. Let's focus on our humanity. Let's center our humanity. So every person that we're engaging with, that's the level that we are engaging with them at, whether they're on the street or next to you in a Tesla with their windows rolled up and they're looking at their, whatever they do in Teslas. Maybe they're not even looking at anything. Actually, if they're in a Tesla, they're not looking at anything. They're probably asleep, right? But I think that, just doubling down on let's start there, because that will
Yes.
silence a lot of the divisive conversations around how do we prioritize these needs.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really moved that today the conversations are starting at this question of definition and humanity, because I think often we can start in places that, yeah, that maybe feel more concrete to assuage people's anxieties, but then it's actually so narrow that we're not really thinking about where we need to start in terms of our questioning as a community to get to these solutions that will actually be more generative and inclusive and political or politicized. So can you just, on the last question, because I know now it's all cleared out, but can you tell us, like, what's one thing that you were really looking forward to today? Like, this is like the first time folks are gathering in this way in a really long time. Like, what does this mean to you? What are the stakes? And like, I don't know, like, what's something that,
I'm just looking around.
I know. Yeah, me too.
Everywhere I look, I see colleagues that I know. That's what's great about this. And then I think what I was expecting, I'm experiencing, which is this feeling of community and togetherness. And when you have that feeling, then you feel like you have a foundation to do all of the work that you're doing. And I was, expecting just the exchange of ideas, which is great. I don't have all the answers. No one's here saying they have all the answers, but it's the conversation, because some philosophers say that, conversation is consciousness. And so having conversations is a way for us to, create a different consciousness. If we're in space together, talking together, then that means we are liberating our thoughts and ideas, and those thoughts and ideas are going to find their place, right? They're like seeds that we're casting. So I think that coming here, like coming to, I don't know, like, in the Midwest, they have these things, the silos, they fill them with corn, and they keep them all season long. And when it's like not doing well, they go and they throw these seeds. I'm from the Midwest, so.
Yeah.
But the idea is that you can go to something like a silo and there is energy there. Wow. So you're coming here into this place, and you're grabbing a little energy to take back with you, that you plant those other seeds in your community with
And
your
propagate.
friends.
Yeah.
Totally propagate. That's exactly it. That's a brilliant word. That's what we're trying to do here. And that's what I feel like we've experienced.
We're like all little rhizomes going through our mycelium networks.
Oh my God. Mushrooms.
Sharing our nutrients.
Mushroom culture.
Mushroom culture. I feel like there is like a fungal network that I think we're adopting as artists, and we always have been. Maybe it's just that's the language that's more accurate to what we've always done.
That's really, really brilliant. I love that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking with us and taking time.
Thank you for being
How can
here.
people stay connected with your work?
I would love it if people could find me on Instagram, of course. It's Art Catalista, and my name is Maria Jenson, and you can find me at SOMArts by typing in maria@somaarts.org if you want to reach me directly, and I do respond.
Thank you so much, Maria. What a joy.